Hi, everyone. I'm Michael McCarthy. I'm one of the instructors for the Harvard PDP Strategic Sales Management class. And I would like to welcome today a special guest speaker on strategic sales management and gender issues. I'd like to introduce Ebba Laurin. Ebba, welcome.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's a privilege and a pleasure to have this conversation. It's not many who are interested in that combination, gender, equality, and strategic sales.
The reason that we're interested in it is it's a bit of a funny background. I've always worked for women. So I've never seen the glass ceiling. I've never had the issue. And last semester, we actually had a student who specifically requested that we speak to that point and wanted more academic journals. And when I started to research more academic journals on professional sales management and women, I only found one. And that was when I said, this is an issue because there's an absence, there's an absolute void. And I feel really privileged that one of my friends, Johan Bergman, in my social network knew you and introduced you to me. So I really appreciate you taking out the time and the time change from Sweden to chat with us today.
It's my pleasure, Michael. It's my pleasure.
So could you share with us just a little bit of your background in sales and where you are in academia so we can get a sense of your timeline of where you started out and where you are now?
Of course. But first, I want to comment on your observation that when going through literature in sales, you do not find a lot of women. That is so. Williams and Plouffe went through 1,012 articles in sales. That was some years ago, but still, if you look at the last first names and last names on there, you won't find a lot of women. Reed and Plank covered the whole marketing area. Again, not enough women. So where I'm coming from, let's go back 45 years plus. I was born in South Korea. I was adopted to Sweden by my parents, Mr. and Mrs. Laurin. So a nice academic family in Lund. And I grew up with culture, with traveling, with an openness and an interest and an ardent belief that came from both my mum, who did a career in pediatric and dentistry, and my dad, who was a lawyer. Both were really, really convincing when they said, Ebba, you can do anything that you want. So I went out in Sweden in the 80s and the 90s, studying and working, summer jobs, odd jobs. I can tell you when I closed my first deal. And I was just stunned by some of the inequalities that I found in Swedish working life every other day. I chose to go to Glasgow University to study. Again, I went into a 4-year program of management and organization, also a very male-oriented subject. I think if we skip a number of years and look onto where I am now in academia, after 15 years in business as a female executive in a male engineering company, that is the telco company Ericsson, I find myself in academia also wondering, where are the women? But I also see we have a bright future. The two things that unite sales and unite academic labor in terms of research is the existence of objective criteria. So what you have written, how good your analysis is, your models, how practically versatile they are or not. And in sales, you have numbers. So the sales domain is really a domain where women can show their track record on the same premise as a man. So net sales, orders intake, orders booked. I find that promising, but the state of the nation today is a bit, leaving me at least kind of wanting. So I'm happy to have this conversation with you.
Thank you. So I actually have two goals for the participants who are going to be taking our course at Harvard Executive Ed this year in 2018. The first is for the female population, to speak to them and give them the voice that they need to help them be more successful, your best words of advice. And then the male population, why should they listen? Why should they care? What could they do differently that's actually going to make the organization as a whole sell more? Are there special, unique strengths that a woman has that aren't being tapped for the organization? You know, how can we make things better? And why would a male want to listen to this film? Well, those are my goals today.
And those are really excellent goals, really excellent goals. So starting with your female students, I want to give them tools so that they can be empowered and pursue, learn and excel sales and sales management. That is excellent. The method which you would use in doing so is to hear their stories, listen to them. Why is this a problem? Why is inequality in sales management a problem? How do they conceptualize it? What type of hinders, barriers, and stuff do they meet? And how is that impacting their work negatively? So with women in business, you have as much competence. I would say in some fields, there are documented more solid competence in female because we have a higher grades and higher numbers finish their education in university, at least in Europe. So there is a lot of competence, but there's also a different perspective, especially in organizing groups and teams. There's a social, I would say almost a micro-social responsibility that is quite a strength in women in business, I find. To the male audience or to higher level executives, hopefully both female and male, I would say diversity creates friction. That's just so. If we have many nationalities, different time zones, both genders, several generations in our teams, there will be friction because we have different perspectives on things and we see and argue things differently. We value different matters at work and in business. If we can tap into an excellent communication between our team members and the customers, then we have a lot of value to conceptualize, talk about, and bring to the customer. I'll just give you a brief example from my first book, which is on work-life balance. I interviewed famous people and not so famous people in Sweden. And this was after the internet boom, which Sweden was very, very big in. That's where Klarna, Spotify, and the next generation, Mojang, King, our gaming industry was coming from. So in the 1990s, 2000s, you have this really tricky situation where you want people to take responsibility for their workload and their stress. So I was curious, is this different in males or females? And what are those differences, if any? So I interviewed a number of people, and one woman, she fled from Iran with her kids to Sweden. When she came to Sweden, she phoned each major insurance company saying, I speak 3 different languages fluently. So maybe I could work in your customer support, because I'm sure you would have customers who would want me to speak either French, Arabic. And they said, no, we're fine. Our customers will need to speak Swedish or they can't be our customers. So in this regard, when Sweden understood that by including women, other cultures, and really embracing diversity, we were making more customer relationships. We were making more business. Business were developing in a sense that was sustainable and strategic, not only brand-wise, because in Sweden we're very sensitive to authenticity and inauthenticity. So to make a real difference with inclusive teams will create a lot of opportunities, will build your authenticity, and it will contribute to your strategic direction.
So it sounds like I can infer from you that if you do have a diverse sales team, you can increase sales because you're going to be relating to more customers in your customer base. So let me ask the flip of that. Do you think that inequality in women decreases sales?
Yes, absolutely.
And could you give us some examples, or maybe a deeper dive on how you would see inequality actually decreasing sales for the organization?
One, I think it depends on what type of sales. If it's very short-term wins and a very, very rapid sales cycle, I'm not sure that it does. But as soon as selling becomes more relational, more complex in terms of the composition of products and services, and over time, that's where you really, really dig into the value that a woman will contribute with in terms of stamina. In terms of not being too high and mighty to do the grunt work, the actual coordinating, the proofreading, the serving the customer information that is readily available to them, having her sit and customizing something for hours and hours. So when it becomes over time relationally significant and complex, that's where I see that we really tap into females bringing a sustainable business to the table.
So if we were getting into, just to repeat this back to make sure I have this correct, the more complex the sale, the more relational the sale needs to be, that's where women's strengths are going to be pulling out, where sales could be increasing.
Definitely.
And do you find that there are certain industries where, let's say that I'm the sales manager, and I'm agnostic on who I have based on who they are. I just want to maximize sales. Are there certain industries where I would want to say, I really want a woman for that? I would really rather have a woman for that industry or that type of sale. Could you maybe guide our male viewers into, hey, if you have this kind of business, you really want a woman there, not a guy. Would you be able to get that specific?
No, because going too much in that direction would be counterproductive to the logic of my argument. I'm saying we need both, and we need to acknowledge the competence and potential that people have, male or female, I would say to the male recruiting CEO or recruiter and the female recruiter, because this is a norm. Male orientation in any career, it's a norm that both females and males are geared into from start, from society and over the years. I would say be practical and make two lists. Always make two lists. So once you have top 5 candidates for the job and they are male, make one with females. And then you start analyzing. It's not that cumbersome. It's like you look at 10 contacts on your LinkedIn profile or list, and you list 5 males and 5 females. When you look at that, you will see how each of the individuals will be bringing slightly different competences to the table. One will have maybe a huge track record, but that's not perhaps predictive of how that person will perform in the next role and the next role. So we can do that just now. Close your eyes and think of one male person that you think is awesome in business, that you would put into a great sales manager role now. And then think about a woman, also in your near vicinity, in your network, and imagine her doing the exact same job. So now you look at me, please. Did you see that there are slightly different flavors to those competences and those promises, potentials?
Yes.
Yeah.
I felt that the woman was more honest and more trustworthy.
And I would say today, yes. But paradoxically, I'm aspiring for that to be totally gender neutral as well, because I really do believe that we need to be honest and authentic when we do business. We can get away with being not so authentic and not so over the board once or twice, but we cannot get away with doing business in an unethical way over time, or in relational complex situations, or with complex solutions. So we live in such an open and transparent society that, at least in Sweden is a tiny country, Michael. It's my kids, they're 10 and 7, and we walk around in our neighborhood and they ask, "Mum, do you know everybody?" And I say, "No, but there are not that many Swedish Korean academics walking around with her kids in Stockholm." So basically they know me and I know them, of course. But this is how tiny Sweden is. You can't get away with doing bad business or having employing your sales force and giving them really bad conditions, because everybody in Sweden will know it's a matter of time. And when they do, they don't want to do business with you. And today there are so many alternatives. Competition is dense, to say the least. Competitors are falling from the cloud, and clouds everywhere. And they enter a market rapidly, and suddenly you're in VUCA, what I'm talking about and teaching and workshopping about. You're in free fall. You're like a skydiver in free fall. You're in VUCA, and your chute is not acting the way it should. It's not sailing nicely over your head. That's when you need to be able to rely on people. So honesty, trustworthiness, and actually doing what you say that you were doing is going to be hard currencies going forward.
And can you share with our viewers a little bit on what VUCA is, for those that haven't heard of that term before?
VUCA is an acronym. It is actually originated from the US, West Point. So it's used in strategic leadership, originally from the military domain. It stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And VUCA has some characteristics. VUCA means that you're in a context which is so rapidly changing in unforeseeable ways that you need to be, and this is a bit of a mind-boggling thing, you need to prepare for the unprepared, you know, to expect chaos and prepare to handle chaos. So how you organize yourself in real time, given the context and the circumstances you're in, that's as how you become relevant in VUCA. And in VUCA, leaders and employees are working cross boundaries, so across hierarchical boundaries, across functional boundaries, because the origin and the analogy is that the soldiers who came to Kuwait, the US soldiers who came to Kuwait, weren't trained for the type of scenario that they were meeting in Kuwait. So they found themselves kind of cut off with a rain of fireworks, not in a good way, in a bad way. And they looked at their pals saying, "You're not in my platoon. No, you're not in my platoon either. So what are we going to do? How can we get organized? Who can we communicate with? Where can we find our leaders?" Sure, but mostly, where can we find our comrades? Where are the other soldiers, and how can we organize a defense, a retreat, a relevant response? VUCA entered business through a couple of key articles from Harvard Business Review. They were on talent management, because in VUCA is like tabula rasa. You got a bit of Latin in Swedish there. It's like a clean slate. You enter VUCA and it's all white. You have to start drawing your own path, your plan, your exit, your goal, your strategy. So that's what talent management is about in VUCA. I hire a person today with the knowledge that your job may be entirely different in 6 months. You may be interacting with very new people and in very new ways. And you want people who are able to navigate and perform in VUCA conditions. You want to build an empowered employee, but also self-organizing team, so that you as a leader can focus on motivation, strategic direction, and those who are close to the customer or close to the task have the tools and the mandate to solve situations, advance the business.
Interesting. It sounds fascinating. So as we close up our interview, to stick to our 15 minutes for our viewers' attention span, I'd ask you to think of 2 questions. So the first is going to be speaking to our female participants, and it would be your words of wisdom or advice on what you suggest they do to do better. The second would be to a very specific male. And you don't have to close your eyes, but I'm going to ask you to imagine a traditional middle-aged white male who just wants to be surrounded by traditional middle-aged white male salespeople. I'm going to ask you to give him a pitch of why he should consider a woman on his team or women on his team, and how that can benefit himself and the organization as a whole. Okay?
So starting with you, dear female colleagues, allies, friends, and future business partners, I hope. Let's start with a slightly introvert question. Your career and hinders to your career and your advancement, where are those hinders? Are they actually in you, or are they in the context, the organization, and the managerial system that you're in? Most women, they say both. But there's definitely a point in sitting down and saying, what are my career goals? So where do I want to be in 3 years? Do I want to be CEO of an international service company that has working in all time zones and customers everywhere? If you can step into that slight feeling of hubris and dare to express your ambitions, that will help you, definitely. Then you can look at, in relation to that target or that career goal, where are your obstacles? So are they structural? Is it about men always recruiting men? If so, how can you get in edgewise? What do you use? Do you use your academic competence? Do you use your strategic thinking? Do you work proactively but within reason? What type of tool do you use to get in and get leverage? Try to focus and take one step at a time. So don't try and foresee a whole chain of events, resistance, possibilities that may go you by. Take one thing at a time. Address that obstacle, opportunities in the best way you can, whilst thinking about your goal, your long-term goal, if that's 3 years, or your short-term goals. But start with yourself. Am I holding myself back? If so, how? Are other people or structures holding me back? If so, how? Who? And what are my relevant actions to address those? To the male audience, I'm looking at you, Michael, and I'm smiling because in some regards you fit the bill, but not in terms of traditional. You're not very traditional. But I'm going to look at you and also say to you and other successful men, you will be losing business really fast, if you can't include people in your team that is women, different ethnicities, different people, different everything. If you don't do that, then the world is not going to be your playing field. Your little village is going to be your playing field. And if it's anything like Sweden, our villages tend to be depopulated because people don't want to live there. So sooner or later, it will be a fairly lonely place where you and your male pals do tiny business, have beer, and do saunas on the Friday. But earn money and thrive and develop strategically, you will not.
I love it. Thank you. All right. I really appreciate your time and your insights and your perspective, as well as your wisdom. And I also like your humor. I really appreciate the time you've spent with us, Ebba, and I'm sure that our participants really appreciate your time as well.
It's a privilege. Again, I'm there, I'm here. It's modern time, so connect with me at any time. It'll be a delight to continue our conversation.
And if some of our participants did want to reach out to you to have a chat, how can they reach you?
ealpha.ebbalaurin.com. Ebbalaurin.com is my website. It's currently in Swedish. It's a Swedish thing, which I'll explain when the camera is off, because it's such a Swedish specificity that you need really, it's quite sensitive and very, very interesting. So maybe when we get into selling in different cultures, selling in different nations, maybe then I'll give you a piece of the Swedish lowdown. But in essence, ebbalaurin.com, there's a contact on my email, and just ignore the Swedish and write to me in Italian, French, German, or English.
Excellent. And EbbaLaurin.com is just the exact spelling of the name that we can see on the screen right now. Okay.
EbbaLaurin.com.
Excellent. Ebba, thank you so much for your time, and I hope we can chat again.
Thank you.
Take care.
You